Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening.
Hold one, Andre.
You're not good at this. Get out. Let me tell you a personal story about Vince McMahon.
You just made the list.
Oh my God!
Sorry, no speak English.
Dummy. Goodbye and good night. Hold two, on bar.
It's still real to me, damn it!
Dummy.
This is the worst town I've ever been in.
Hold three, Lamas covers, three-handle family Gradunzel.
Mamma mia!
And now,
Unchained.media presents the B Plus Podcast with your host, Greg Unchained.
It's me, Austin! It was me all along, Austin!
number four, armbar.
I will never retire!
I still got 200 more. I got 200 more holes to list.
All right, ladies, gents, and non-binary friends, welcome to the B Plus Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Unchained. Today is, I don't know, depends on when I edit this one. I've had a very busy week, so you'll hear it when you hear it. But of course, our Patreon subscribers will hear it first because it's a bonus episode. Specifically, Jules, the man, he has signed up for our super producer package on Patreon, which means he gets to tell us what he wants to hear us talk about. He gets to pick the panel and everything. So joining me, at the request of Jules, Mr. Mysterious.
Salutations, good to be back.
And Danders the Manders.
Living large as always, fellas.
Yeah, and we are going to be talking about the top 5 female wrestlers we've seen live, because our last lists were not inclusive enough.
Mine was.
Unfortunately. Yours was. Yeah, I should... Yeah, I'll take the heat there. I didn't include any women because I know, like, I was... And this list was a lot harder, too. This list was a lot harder, the top 5 women I've seen live. It ended up being very Australian-heavy.
I feel like just because like the amount of people we've seen live, obviously that's more on our end than overseas. So
yeah, I think it also speaks to the way overseas wrestlers are booked in the country, which I think we can get to. I think we can use this as a way to discuss that even. But Danders sort of decided to do her own thing. She doesn't play by anyone's rules.
Yeah, I'll have my own list with blackjack and hookers.
So we were supposed to talk about the top 5 women that we've seen live. And Danders kept saying, no, I'm just going to do matches. And I was like, that's not what the request was. And she said, I'm just going to do matches. So what did you end up doing for us, Danders?
So I ended up messaging Jules and being like, Jules, can I do matches? And he said, absolutely, Danders. You can do whatever you want. You are living large and in charge. I've taken some liberties there with what he actually said. But basically he said, okay. Now, my reasoning behind this, I think that a lot of people struggled with was that brain has gone to sleep, was that my favorite wrestlers, I haven't seen good matches of them live, and the people that I consider to be not my favorite wrestlers have put on some incredible bouts in front of my very eyes. And there is one person who appears in my list quite frequently who I realize that I don't give enough credit to them. So it's been a learning experience for me.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing who that is. In that case, I mean, we should talk about our criteria for what we've done.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, once again, I go about the aura. Like I talked about this last time. I can't explain it. It's a connection thing. Like if I feel as an audience member connected to the character in the ring, to what they're doing, if I feel like that person is a star, if I feel like in seeing them, I will pay money to see more of them, to buy their shirts, to wear their shirts, all that sort of stuff. That is what puts them in the list. So for me, it's not necessarily about strict in-ring work, and it's not even necessarily about promo or any of that. It's sort of a vibe, which I know is very hard, very difficult to define, but it's a vibe thing. It's a vibe.
Mine was more the athleticism and in-ring work, so how they performed on the night, or however many times I've seen these particular wrestlers perform. So, because of course we have, like we mentioned, international stars come over, and although they are fantastic wrestlers, some of the best globally, their time in Australia sometimes not the best, or they haven't had the best chance to really shine out. So that was my criteria.
Even with WWE, I think that happens, right? I mean, like, let's touch on it. Obviously, Dander's Becky Lynch is someone who is one of your favorite wrestlers and mine, and she doesn't make my list because, again, when I saw her live, there just wasn't much about her. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
At the Super Showdown. So she didn't make my list because of that, even though she would make a list of my top 5 women wrestlers that I'm a fan of, if that makes sense.
Exactly. That's the same problem that I had. And like, I've only been watching local wrestling for, I think 2015 was my first show. So 2015, 2016. And full disclosure, Melbourne doesn't have a plethora of female wrestlers, or didn't then. It's getting better now.
Yeah.
And particularly the shows that I would go to wouldn't necessarily always have the best female talent on display. I think that, especially in recent times, I've learned that Sydney and also to an extent Adelaide are a bit more spoiled in that regard. You guys seem to get a lot more.
Yeah, WA not so much.
That's a terrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget WA exists. I'm sorry.
I feel like Adelaide has the issue as well. I think Sydney is the best place to be if you're an Australian women's wrestling fan. Yeah. But Melbourne are working to change that with the Glow in Real Life and things like that. I think Melbourne are definitely working to change that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the snippets from what I see at MCW Academy, there's quite a few girls in there, which is great. It's a work in progress, but I really felt.
We sure about other companies as well are bringing people over. Like, I know Showdown have just announced, they're bringing more interstate women in, which is good. And basically every state should be doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But let's get to our lists now. Before we start the list proper, Big Boy Mikey, once again, unable to be here because of regular work-life commitments. But he wanted to send in his list by proxy. He started with a special mention for Shazza McKenzie. So Shazza McKenzie didn't make the list but got an honorable mention. He hasn't given me any rationale for his list, so I'm just going to go through 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. At 5, he has listed Asuka, right? Mm-hmm. So he would have seen her, I assume, on the NXT tour. I didn't. They didn't come to Adelaide, so I didn't get to see them. Then on number 4, he's got Trish Stratus. Number 3, Natalya. Number 2, Madison Eagles. And number 1, Tessa Blanchard. Good list. It's a very good list. I didn't know. When has Trish Stratus been to Australia?
Like, probably early 2000s.
Wow. I don't recall her being on any of those tours, but I guess it was a different time, so it was a long time ago.
Do you have in your notes there, because I know that Mikey mentioned, he did outline a reason for Natalya, and the reason that I say that is because I know that Natalya gets a bad rap, especially with all the bigger talents, but he did point out one match specifically that he loved, that he saw that Natalya is in. I believe it was also in the NXT tour, if she was on that.
Okay, sure. So I didn't get the NXT tour, so I didn't pay attention to it. It was one of those things, much like the Progress tour when it happened. I was like, it's not coming to Adelaide. It doesn't exist to me, because I wasn't doing the podcast yet. So that was my general attitude to things that skipped Adelaide back then.
Okay.
Yeah. But let's...
Do we have any salsa for that chip on your shoulder, mate?
Well, listen.
Still not bitter.
Us and Perth, man, we're the forgotten cities.
Yeah, I remember. This is a completely abstract reference, and I apologize. Perth have a pretty awesome hockey team, the Perth Thunder. They do really well throughout the season and then fall apart come finals. And there was this guy who was from Perth, quite intoxicated, and he was like, Melbourne think they're so much better than Perth. And I was like, as a team? He's like, no, as a city. And I was like, Melbourne don't think they're better than Perth. Melbourne don't think about Perth at all. I'm sorry. Yeah. We think we're better than Sydney. And he was very upset.
Yeah. Melbourne, you have issues. And Danders, you are Melbourne in this instance.
I'm fully aware. One more tangent. I got into an argument with our other great Patreon, El Chapo. Him and his friend at PWA on Friday night. It was like, I was saying that AFL gets much bigger crowds than NRL. it's just a fact. And he's like, well, that's because there's nothing to do in Melbourne. And I was like, what's better to do in Sydney than go to the rugby? He's like, have you seen the Harbour Bridge? I was like, so you're telling me looking at a bridge is better than going to a rugby game? I was like, no, that's probably accurate. That's probably accurate of how I feel about
Wow.
rugby.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can cut that out if you want. End tangent. Let's talk about more relevant stuff.
Let's get into our actual list. Now, does anyone else have any honorable mentions they want to throw in there? My honorable mention I touched on before is Becky Lynch. I feel like aura-wise, like she's right there, but Super Showdown, it wasn't heavily Becky Lynch themed, you know? So it didn't really, I didn't get the vibe, and that's the only time I've seen her live. So, but I will give her an honorable mention because it was still really awesome to see.
Yeah, I give honorable mention to Becky Lynch as well, I guess. That did help build their feud to go into the last women's standing. Was it a count out or was it a disqualification in that match? I was very drunk during that match at Super Showdown.
Yeah, that's the thing with live experiences sometimes. I'm not completely sure on what the finish was, but I know it was a building match. It wasn't, the story wasn't paying off or anything. It didn't feel huge at the time, but it definitely built into bigger things at Evolution.
It was either DQ or count out.
I'm feeling count out. Let's say count out, and we write the history here. So it was a count out, definitely.
Sounds good.
So unfortunately, I could not make it to Super Showdown as much as I would love to include Becky or Charlotte in my honorable mentions, but I'll go Izzy Shaw, like from Adelaide. I'd say she's a good one to say honorable mention. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Good honorable mention. I'm adding her to my honorable mentions now. Very good honorable mention. I love Izzy Shaw. She's amazing.
Very consistent worker, and she makes the effort to come down here all the time. So she's one of the few women's wrestlers who comes down here, so we appreciate her work.
Yeah, definitely. I actually feel bad now looking at my list. I'm like, oh crap, I don't have any Adelaide representation, even though it's where I live.
Shame.
Is Riley not on your list?
Awkward. No, Riley's not on my list. Riley has not made my list. Riley is fantastic. She has such a connection with that crowd. I watched her last night at the Adelaide Championship Wrestling. She has such a connection with that crowd. It's crazy. But I feel like I'd need to see her in front of other crowds before I would include her on this list.
I've never seen Riley live, but she's going on my honorable mentions just because she's such a fucking queen.
She is. That's her gimmick, right? She's the queen of ACW. But yeah, the ACW crowd are very loyal to her, so it skews your vision. Like when you're there, you get like it's almost like a version of beer goggles. What would we call it? I don't even know. Fan goggles, I guess.
Goggles.
Just because everyone else is like so in love with the person, you're like, yes, absolutely. Like you just sort of joined the cult almost.
Yeah, it's like indie fans when like the Young Bucks breathe. It's like, oh my god, let's buy a t-shirt of them breathing.
All right, let's not get into your weird things with the Bucks and the Elite. All right, Danders, let's leave that out of it. We're focusing on the women today, which Brandy Rhodes should be an honourable mention as well. I should put that out there.
No, those matches, well, I can only speak for the Melbourne matches.
No, but like again, for me, vibe. Aura.
Okay.
Like, you want to talk about a fucking queen. Brandy Rhodes is the queen of all wrestling, in my opinion. Like, I don't know, she's amazing. But let's get into our lists proper. I'm going to cheat with number 5, and you're all going to hate me. Number 5, I started with the Riot Squad collectively.
That's fine.
That's all right.
Yeah. I feel like as a group, like, I mean, so I'm a big fan of Ruby Riot from her days as Heidi Lovelace in the Indies and Chikara specifically. And yeah, everything she's done with intergender wrestling and stuff in Chikara is amazing. If you're not familiar, everyone should go check out Heidi Lovelace. Google it, she'll come up. And she has now become, of course, Ruby Riot, and she leads the Riot Squad in WWE. And their chemistry together, though, like as much as I love Ruby Riot and as phenomenal as I think she is, their chemistry as a unit is just it's similar to like New Day or DX or just any of these iconic groups. They lift each other and make each other like the whole is definitely more than the sum of the individual parts with the Riot Squad.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I had full appreciation of the Riot Squad until it was, I believe, Evolution, where they were all in Halloween costumes and they all came out as Liv was Pennywise and Sarah Logan was Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Ruby was what is the name of the Jigsaw? She was Jigsaw from Saw.
Yeah.
And I just thought they were so much fun. Like Ruby is the leader, and Sarah is the "I'ma fuck you up" girl, and then Liv is I call Liv like the Avery because she's so adorable and
I can see it.
yeah.
Do you watch It's Always Sunny?
No, I don't.
She's the wild card. She's the Charlie of the group.
I'm gonna stick with she's the Avery.
She's the wild card. Wild card. It's a thing.
Okay.
Every group needs a wild card.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that it's no secret I whinge every week about how the Riot Squad are treated. They're not treated with the respect that they deserve, and I think
100%.
It's valid,
collectively as a unit, they are the most diverse. I don't think there's any weak links in the trio there.
No, not at all. Who have you got at number 5, Danders?
Well, I'm
Or
going
what
with
match?
matches.
Right. What match do you have at number 5?
So for number 5, mine aren't really in order because I love them all. So number 5, my match was Toni Storm versus Shazza McKenzie at MCW Final Battle 2017. I don't think that this match showcased the best of either individual, but seeing Toni Storm as she was on the precipice of where she is now, like she was still a big name then, but she wasn't super known to WWE fans. Like unless you're an indie fan, you didn't know who she was.
Yeah, she wasn't Mae Young Classic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So she had done the Mae Young Classic, but she wasn't the winner. Like she wasn't Mae Young Classic 2. Anyway,
Yeah, the first time, yeah.
Okay. So I thought that this felt huge, and she was so much fun to watch. Like, despite the fact that she'd obviously wrestled in front of much bigger crowds, she still treated MCW like it was a massive deal. She was really animated. She was lots of fun. Shaz is the same on a heel capacity, and they were both so much fun to watch. The MCW Final Battle 2017 is probably my favorite show that I've been to live. It was just so much fun, and these two ladies were awesome.
Amazing. Nice. And Mysterious.
So I picked someone with Riot in their name, but it's not Ruby. Over here in WA, there's a woman named Roxy Riot, and she was the last All Action Wrestling Women's Champion before they retired the belt because the pool of talent to draw upon was not that vast. But she's one of those performers. I've seen her multiple times throughout AAW and SWA. She fights. She's kind of like Awesome Kong Karma in terms of her offense and her presence as well. Like she's just a real beat you down, knock you out kind of character. And yeah, very much appreciate her work over here.
Yeah. Big girl doing big girl things.
Big girl doing big girl things, absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like we say that about big boys all the time, but there's a fear around saying it with big girls, right? Like big girls doing big girl things, but it's absolutely a thing in wrestling, and it should be fucking celebrated, man. Because there's nothing better than a good big man match or a good big girl match. Like when it's done well, it's amazing.
So she's gone up against Alison Cruz from Generation Zero, and some of the stars who actually held the Women's Championship belt over here was actually Toni Storm. She actually held it at one stage back in, I believe, 2012. You can look up, the design of it was atrocious, but the significance of it was spectacular.
A lot of Australian belts throughout history have had terrible designs.
Yeah.
I feel like it's changing now, but there have been some absolute shockers. My number 4 came up there during Dander's number 5. Shazza McKenzie. People know that she is my personal favorite Australian professional wrestler.
I'm surprised she's not higher on your list.
This is the thing, right? Everyone always says that, like, how's she not high? How does she not make the list? I've got other Australians that are going to make this list ahead of her, even though she's my favorite Australian wrestler. It's completely inconsistent. I understand this. I respect this. But it just is what it is, man. It is what it is. I love Shazza McKenzie. I think she's a fantastic talent. And when I was first exposed to Shazza McKenzie, she was super bitch heel, right? Mm-hmm. Like Mean Girls type. Like she was the cheerleader that doesn't cheerlead, right? The cheerleader with no cheerleading experience. And she was in the Pink Nation, and she had Sean Custom would come out and she'd get him to bend down, and she'd climb up him to get into the ring and stuff. It was, she was the heel, and she was. I'm pretty sure next to Jack Bonza, I don't think anyone has ever called me fat more than Shazza McKenzie. Actually, it might have been Sean Custom at ringside calling me fat. I don't know. I know the Four Nations have a problem with my weight, but no, it's fine. It's all in the past. Shazza, though,
You used to be bigger than you are now, Greg.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've fluctuated a lot. Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say, like, I
yeah.
saw you like in December, and okay, you're not shredded for stereo, but I wouldn't be like, I wouldn't see you walking down the street and be like, look how large that gentleman is. Like, you're not to the point where I would need to point out your size to you. But I guess if people just want to be heels, that's what they can.
No, but it's heels being heels. It's heels being heels, and I've had it from a few different heels. It's mostly most usually from heels that are quite muscular.
Yeah.
So now that I think about it, it was probably Sean Custom with his ripped fucking abs that was pointing it out. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, as a heel, I fell in love with Shazza McKenzie's work. Like, I loved to boo her. Like, she was just a great heel. And then since then, of course, with PWA and everything, she has ended up becoming this really fun, bubbly babyface. And she does that character so well as well that it connects with absolutely everyone. And she's one of the most beloved women in the country. And so for me, like, when I'm talking about the vibe and everything, like, I have to include Shazza McKenzie there because she's able to do everything.
The thing that's interesting about Shazza, and I guess it's an attribute to her character, is that overseas talent who come out here and meet her and wrestle with her always have glowing reviews of her. And I think that is more, that says more about her character than, because fans, I mean, everything is so subjective. Like, it's the style of wrestling that you like, and even things like appearance and preference that way, that's going to affect who you like. But when women in the industry always have glowing reviews, you always see them raving about her, I think that's really attributes to what a quality performer she is.
Yeah, absolutely,
no doubt.
Yeah, and so we'll go with Mysterious, then we'll let Danders give her match because she's all out of the. You're not part of the group, Danders.
I don't even go here.
Number 4, I went with Big Boy Mikey as well. So I picked Asuka for my number 4. So I actually was able to see her when she appeared in Perth for the NXT episodes when she toured Australia. So she defended the NXT championship against Peyton Royce, and Peyton played up the heel really well, despite that she's the hometown girl, just saying, like, you asshole should be cheering me, I live here. But if you want to talk about presence, this is when they still treated her as this undefeated, like, goddess of wrestling over in Japan.
Empress.
I was trying to find the word.
She was fighting with people on Twitter about that. So it was like, someone called her a queen, and she was like, Empress, I'm going to bluff you now.
I do.
Yeah, you can't call her goddess. That was Alexa Bliss, right?
Yeah,
Alexa Bliss is the goddess. Yeah, she's the Empress.
Yeah, but yeah, in terms of the quality of match, like, so she is a fantastic wrestler, and like, she's proved that time and time again, like, with WWE. But when she came over to WA, I'd say there's a few other people who I'd put a little bit higher.
Fair call. And your next match on your list, Anders, because you don't even have numbers, apparently. Such a rebel.
I choose not to use numeric scales to determine the worth of women, Gregory. See what I did there?
This is why you're a 4.
Oh, God.
Number 4, I had Avery versus Vixen from Underworld. I don't know, because Underworld is filmed and it goes for TV. It was the Underworld that took place late last year. I believe it was November, the last show of last year. Avery versus
Underworld
Vixen
confuses me.
Yeah.
When we talk about, like, when the matches, yeah.
Now, I know Vixen is a veteran of women's wrestling in Victoria, but I hadn't seen her prior to this, and she was insanely good. It's no secret how much I love Avery. I believe I just made reference to her in something completely unrelated about 5 minutes ago. So I love Avery and Vixen. I think that Avery has come so far from when I first saw her 3 years ago. She is such a fantastic performer, and they had, I believe it was a hardcore match or whatever. There's rules with Underworld. Maybe there's no disqualifications in their matches. There's some weird rules. Anyway.
So with title matches, all of their title matches are no DQ.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this must have been a title match. I was very drunk. Anyway,
sure was.
the thing that sticks out most about this match was the guitar spot, which I have referenced several times since I saw it live. Avery bangs Vixen on the head with an acoustic guitar, and the sound that echoed through the dungeon was terrifying. And like, obviously there's ways that they can make that hurt less, but there's nothing you can do to make that not hurt at all. And that guitar plopped straight onto Vixen's head, and it was just a great. You don't often see hardcore matches between two women, and maybe that's what made it so special, because it wasn't especially violent, but that spot in particular puts it at number 4 on my list.
Yeah, Vixen is entirely underrated, even within our own scene.
I think especially as well, like Avery and Vixen have faced like God knows how many times over the years. So like I feel like that match especially don't think it's aired yet on Underworld, but it's like a good culmination of their story together.
Yeah, definitely. And that leads us straight to my number 3, I suppose, which is actually Avery. So I struggled with number 3 and number 2. And again, because I talk about the vibe and everything, and you'll see why when I get to my number 2. But yeah, Avery has everything, and she has come a long way, even just since I've become familiar with her from watching the first few things I've seen of her through to now. And yeah, just superstar. Like, there's no other word. She is a superstar. And she's one of those people as well, like I talked about with Shazza McKenzie, right, with the heel and the face. And with Shazza, she plays 2 very different characters as heel and face, whereas Avery has that character that I think can transcend almost, it's a bit sacrilege here, I'm sorry, Danders, but almost in a Becky Lynch-ish way, like where Becky doesn't need to change who she is to be face or heel now, right? I feel like Avery is sort of verging on that here, where the crowd want to cheer her already, and pretty much the only reason they don't is because she's aligned with Brat Pack. When she's not with Brat Pack, when she's out there on her own, they're cheering her, and she doesn't do anything different. So she just has a real special vibe about her to me, and I've only seen her that once at the Melbourne City Wrestling Show, and it was enough for me to be like, this is someone special.
Did you not go to Wrestle Rock?
Oh yeah, no, I did. Yeah, she was at Wrestle Rock as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, that weekend is blurry.
Yeah,
okay?
it's completely understandable. Completely understandable.
Yeah.
And
I think even the Wrestle Rock people have forgotten that Wrestle Brunch happened. Like...
The thing about Avery as well is that she gets so many creeps, like so many, and she is so polite.
I can imagine.
She is so polite and so lovely and so patient with all the sweaty neckbeards who come up to her and are struggling to talk because they're drooling and are terrified of her and whatever. I'm insulting like 3/4 of our audience right here, but she is so patient for someone who is so savage in the ring. Like, her character can be quite a bitch. The 180, she's so lovely. She's so smiley. She's so patient. I love her. Anyone says anything bad about her, I will punch them.
You can see how patient she is if you go back and watch Bastard TV when she went on a date with Lockie Hendricks. You know, just putting that out there. I interviewed Lockie Hendricks yesterday, and he was mean to me, so I'm going to be mean back.
Is this a new, like, are people, because this is being talked about a lot, are people seeing this for the first time?
The Bastard TV stuff. Yeah, it's resurfacing because as Australian wrestling is getting bigger, people are sort of looking through the YouTubes and everything for the names that they now know. And so these things all come up once again. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I remember MCW shared that date between Funtime Phil and his partner, Aria.
For Valentine's Day.
Yeah, because people were talking about that, and I was like, this is a great spot. But I was like, this was like ages ago. I remember watching that
almost a year ago.
Yeah, I remember watching that and thinking, this is one of the funniest promo videos I've ever seen. Like, Jake Lindo in that video is fucking hilarious. I remember, like,
just the censoring.
Yeah, it's like, it was amazing. And I'm not trying to be like a snob and be like, this is so old. What are you guys? I was just like, why are people talking about it now? And then I realized it was getting shared and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the date episodes, especially because of Valentine's Day, which happened just the other week, like they've been circulating around through all the chats and everything, and people are having a good laugh at it, which it is very funny to go back and see pre-Loverboy Lockie Hendricks.
Absolutely. If you haven't seen it, I recommend, if you can find it, Lockie Hendricks' first date with Merch Girl. his first, or maybe it was the third date. I don't know. The promo where he goes on the date with Merch Girl because he gets a lot of PTSD from his Avery date throughout that. It's during the actual show. I remember watching it. It's quite long. I think it goes for about 6 or 7 minutes, but it's hilarious. The Crackerjack and Lockie Hendricks did some amazing promos in their time as a tag team.
They did. Not if you ask Lockie, they didn't, but that's for the interview, which people can listen to in a couple of weeks. I don't know when that's coming out either. I'm really bad at my job this week. I'm sorry, I've got personal things going on. Let's move on though. So that was my number 3, was Avery, because she's an absolute star.
I think I'll carry on. So number 3, I'm going to keep this going. I actually chose Avery as well.
Hey!
So she came here for NHBW's like Trick or Treat themed episode, and there was a double header. So for the start, it was a little cosplay Disney thing that we were doing, and she came out as Sandra Dee, and the fans just loved to hate her over here. But it was a whole she's only been here just a couple times. I've only seen her the once, but just in terms of presence, in terms of ability as well. And I got a chance to talk to her and muck around with her before the show started. And there was also a fair going on about the same time. So there were bouncy castles and stuff, which is not a euphemism. We got to just do random shit together. It was really good.
Yeah, so you guys are killing it for me because I have this image of Avery as just this. I mean, she projects this image on social media too of just she just trashy and messy, just a messy human. And you guys are like, she's really lovely, and I'm like, you're killing the gimmick for me, guys.
You can be trashy and still be lovely. It's called
Absolutely.
a garbage can, not a garbage can't.
I like it. So what's your next match on your list?
So my match number 3 comes from MCW Clash of Titans 2017, which was Kellyanne versus Evie, more commonly known as Dakota Kai. This was Evie's last match before she went off to NXT. And they just really went for it, these two. It was such a hard slog match. I think that there was a spot at the end where Evie fell off the turnbuckle, I think out of the top turnbuckle, just out of exhaustion. And at the end of the match, there was, to tie in with the whole feeling of the vibe, Evie just gave a rave review of Kellyanne, who was a monster heel at the time. She put Kellyanne over, and then it had a really organic face turn for Kellyanne, and it was just a really special moment. You can see how much respect and how much love the two had for each other. And yeah, it was just a really beautiful moment. It was a fucking hard slog of a match. And yeah.
Just in this conversation, I'm just realizing how many honorable mentions I didn't even mention. Because Evie, of course, Dakota Kai, Kellyanne haven't made my list. And they should absolutely be honorable mentions because I have seen both of them perform live, and both of them are absolutely incredible. I saw Evie way back in 2014, I want to say, at the Cube in Campbelltown with PWA. I can't remember if it was a PWA show or a PWWA show. I don't know, but yeah, Evie was on the card there, as was I think Michelle Hasluck from Perth, who I could even put on as another honorable mention because she was phenomenal as well. We've got a lot of really good female performers here in Australia.
Absolutely. I think it's good that Dennis is actually highlighting matches just so we can cover as many people as we can with this list.
Yeah, because we have so... I feel like WWE feel like our women talent are great as well. Peyton Royce was when I was a sweaty neckbeard teen person, was my first wrestling crush at a live wrestling show. Casey Cassidy was just amazing. Again, she was doing a fun babyface kind of gimmick as well. So I'm going to give a special mention to Casey Cassidy as well, because that's, bringing back memories when we go into the archives talking about some of the women that we've had in this country. It's crazy. We're up to me, right? Number 2? Yep. Number 2. Okay. So for number 2, and she's the number 1 Australian on the list, I don't think it'll surprise anyone, Madison Eagles.
Yeah.
Which... I might surprise Mikey because I always go back and forth with him. Shaz McKenzie's better than Madison Eagles because she's my favorite Australian wrestler. But once again, I will put Madison Eagles higher on the list because, again, with the vibe. I mean, when she comes out in PWA in its current incarnation, and everyone's just bowing down to her. And I mean, obviously, all the work she has done with training the young wrestlers of the New South Wales scene, and just everything about her screams like, you want to talk about goddess of wrestling, like Madison Eagles, and she was legitimately number one in the world for a period of time. So Madison Eagles has the vibe. Like, she's a very special character.
Absolutely. And actually, when I was at Mikey's house on the weekend, we were looking at the list of people who she has trained, and it's pretty much a full Hall of Fame of the PWA roster. Like, she has influenced the careers of so many. The reason that she isn't on my list is because I've only ever seen her live in intergender matches. I've never seen her in a women's match live. So that's why I didn't feel like I could put her on my list.
Right. Well, that's another reason that she has made my list, is she was one of the first people I saw work an intergender match live. Her matches with Robbie Eagles were insane. You know, like so for me, because I'm not doing women's matches, I'm doing just women, which was the task, Danders. It's part of the reason she's on the list and so high on the list, is because it adds to that vibe, it adds to that aura, what she did for intergender wrestling in Australia.
Absolutely. She did come out, funnily enough, the last match I mentioned, the Evie versus Kellyanne, she actually came out at the end of that and said, Kellyanne, I'm better than you, and you're going to have to run a gauntlet of matches to try and prove yourself before I'll say that you're worthy to face me. And then Madison got injured before Kellyanne could face her. So I was very close to seeing, which is very unfortunate. I don't mean that to sound as snide as I'm just still very disappointed that we didn't get to see it through no fault of anyone.
Well, that match still has to happen, right?
Maybe. I don't think it has to happen. I think that it would be fantastic if it did. But I don't think that either Kellyanne or Madison have anything to prove to anyone. If it happens, fantastic. If it doesn't, yeah.
And what have you got next, Mysterious?
So I tossed and turned with this one, because if I hadn't already said my number one female wrestler in our previous podcast, I would put this lady at number one, and that is Lena Cross. So she is the WA Women's Wrestler of the Year over here. She's the first woman to win a male-dominated singles title, and she's WA's best kept secret. She's actually just been announced to do Showdown Wrestling, I think, in a couple months. So she's gonna slowly.
I think she's doing Showdown. Sorry to interrupt. I think I saw that this morning. I think she's doing Showdown.
Showdown in Melbourne. You also forgot one of her most important accolades. She was the Perth choice for the B+ wrestlers you may not have heard of, but should definitely pay attention to in 2019, because they wrestle good and do other stuff good too. And you can go back and you can go back and listen to that one. It was on January 1st. It was our New Day special, New Year special, not New Day special. What the hell is New Day special? But carry on.
Absolutely, she's been the women's wrestler I've seen the most over here, especially since I've been a part of the wrestling scene. And just whether it's like man or woman, like she's completely submission specialist, just complete, like she'll kick your ass, and she'll, I don't know, it's just, she just has one of those presence about her that she is going to be a big star in the next coming years. I'm sure of it.
Right, and she's part of the Collarbone Club too, isn't she?
With Brandy, yeah.
So that's an important thing to mention as well. Let's Danders, your next match.
Yeah, my next match was Avery versus Kellyanne versus Indy Hartwell at Wrestle Rock July 2018. This match was just chaos. It was, again, another hardcore match. I remember Indy Hartwell had a table and it had something written across it. It might have been impressive or something. I think it had impressive written across the table. And it was an absolute spot fest. But as someone who doesn't see hardcore matches with women all that often, the weapons that were used in this were just amazing. It was nothing short of like Raven's shopping cart. It was like everything that was in the ring you would find in there. It was insane. Another loose night. Wrestle Rock just does amazing things with women's wrestling. I get that it's meant to be like a rowdy show or whatever, but the stuff that they do with women's wrestling is insane. All about it.
It's all part of the package.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to go to number one. It was at the Wrestle Brunch after party that I saw this woman live. And again, vibe. I'm going to get heat for this, I reckon, for putting her number one on my list. But you want to talk about vibe and aura, which is what I'm talking about. Ronda Rousey. Holy shit. Like, is she even of the same species? She's one of those level of stars. It's impossible not to be in awe when you're in her presence, you know?
She has had the best debut of anyone in WWE for at least a decade, I've got to say.
I was about to chime in there and be like, what about Kurt Angle? And then I was like, that was in 2000. That was more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I feel old.
I can't who did Ronda Rousey even face at Super Showdown?
The Riot Squad.
Yeah.
See, I didn't... Yeah.
We're leaving back around.
Did the double armbar.
Yeah.
Yeah, did the double armbar, and it was, and again, that goes back to, like you said, it goes back around to why Riot Squad made the list as well. Riot Squad probably made my list because they made such a huge impression in that match with Ronda Rousey. She was teaming with the Bellas, right? But yeah, she locked on that double armbar. They put her over huge, and yeah, it was, but just, I don't know, the entire crowd, again, it's another one of those things similar with Riley at the ACW crowd and just how the entire crowd, everyone was there to see Ronda, you know? I have no doubt in my mind that she was one of, if not, I mean, obviously Undertaker, Triple H, and those guys were the big draw card, but I think that Ronda Rousey was easily one of the biggest draw cards on that show.
Yeah, I think for a casual fan, absolutely, people would hear the name Ronda Rousey. Like, I can go see Ronda Rousey for whatever the cheap seats were, like $30. Awesome. I think the Undertaker was the drawing card, in my personal opinion, but.
Yeah, which, I mean, he didn't make my list though. When it came to the top 5 I've seen live, Undertaker, I didn't make my list. He made honorable mentions, didn't he?
It's such an indie mark.
No, it's not that I'm an indie mark. It's just that it wasn't that special. Like the entrance, that's all it was. I was there for the entrance. I literally flew to Melbourne to be there for the entrance. That's.
Oh, I thought you were joking. Like, he obviously didn't make the list because he has a wiener. He doesn't count.
No, I'm talking on the last episode
time.
when we did. Yeah, when we just did top 5 wrestlers we've seen live all together, and when I didn't put any women on the list at all because I'm a filthy misogynist, apparently. But Ronda Rousey makes the list this time. Like, again, when it comes down to the aura, like, yeah, she has that superstar factor more than almost anyone I've ever seen, I'd say. Well, more than anyone I've ever seen, yeah.
Yep, fair call.
Yeah. Moving on, who's your number one?
So
my number...
Oh, not me.
Sorry, guys. Who's that?
We'll close with you, Danders.
Okay, sorry, guys. So my number one, is, as already revealed in the last episode, is Soraya Knights, nearly 30-year veteran, founder of WAW Wrestling over in the UK, and one of the stars of the upcoming Fighting With My Family, coming out in cinemas in Australia in March.
Yeah, she is, of course, the mother of Paige.
Yes, and of course has many accolades to her own acclaim as well.
Yes, no, of course, but I'm just saying the Fighting With My Family connection.
No, I made that mistake when we had a Meriden show over here, like just a small little country show. I made the mistake of like letting fans know, like, I didn't think they would understand who it was that we were bringing out, and to try and bring that home, I said, "Oh, this is Paige's mum." Like, obviously, I didn't say it as bluntly as that, but apparently, she was a little bit upset with me afterwards for phrasing it in that way. And
you got heat.
A little bit of heat, but she emasculated me in the ring, which she made. I atoned for my sins, so that's fair enough.
Wait, how did she emasculate you?
That's a story for another time, I think. But no, it wasn't. I thought I was going to get kicked in the balls. Like, I was bracing for it, but she just she took pity on me, and
Isn't it funny,
Amazing.
like, how that's kind of reversed of what normal circumstances are? It's like, you know, Charlotte Flair doesn't want to be known as Ric Flair's daughter, and, you know, people don't want to be known by their parents because they don't want to think, you know, they only made it into the business because of their parents. It's a bit odd that it's like the reverse. It's like, I don't want to be known as who my child is.
Yeah. Yeah, as opposed to, you know, people like John Cena's dad who take indie bookings specifically as John Cena's dad.
Oh, boy.
Surely, like, Mrs. Dad will get going on that circuit soon.
He's got to,
Yeah.
right? He's got to.
I wouldn't be
He's finally
surprised.
proud of
show
his
up at
son.
WrestleCons.
Yeah,
just-
I wouldn't put it below World Series Wrestling to book Mrs. Dad.
Oh,
Oh no.
you come out, you can guest host with Masa. Is
Yeah, exactly.
that, what have you got for your last offering? for us,
So
Candice?
this is the person I was talking about who I have been underrating, obviously, is Kellyanne, because she's made 3 of my matches, 3 out of 5.
Mm.
And
Yep.
it was the prequel to the match I mentioned earlier, and it was her bout with Evie, which was a last woman standing match at Final Battle 2016. This was the first hardcore style women's match that I ever saw in person. The spot off for those who are familiar with the Thornbury Theatre, they have the balcony. The spot that came off that was like very much, I think she's dead. Like, that was the first thought in my head. It's like, oh my God, she's dead. Like Jerry the King Lawler at when Mankind jumps off the cell. Like, oh my God, he's dead.
Yeah.
And
This is dead.
Oh god.
yeah, so again, not much to say, like, on top of the previous match. These 2 performers went balls to the wall. It was insane. It made me fall in love with women's wrestling again.
Nice. Yeah. Kellyanne is someone who is underrated by everyone, I would say.
Absolutely.
Gonna throw that out there.
Yeah. She's different. She looks different to a lot of the female performers that we have, and I think that should work in her favor, but maybe necessarily doesn't. I know that's controversial
Yeah.
to say.
Well, she also I talked about something that's big for me. Obviously, someone who can do it all, right? Because I talked about with Shazza and Avery, and the face heel, and Kellyanne. I mean, you touched on it. She did the monster heel run,
Yep.
right? She used to. When I first saw her, was in Riot City Wrestling with. He was the loosest cunt at the time in Australian professional wrestling. Like, that was actually what he was billed as.
Yep.
This isn't me saying it. This is what he was billed as. Adam Brooks. And she was like a bitch heel at that point. And yeah, so she's able to play multiple different characters, because now she's sort of she's still kind of like a monster, but not so much. Like, she's like the women. She's just like the toughest woman in the room that everyone absolutely respects.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think even when she was heel, it wasn't like she was like mean, but she wasn't like catty. Like, it wasn't like come out here and be like, ah ha ha, you're ugly or whatever,
Yeah.
like we see with shitty heels. It was like,
Right.
I can fuck you up. And when she's faced, she's still like, I can fuck you up, but I'm not going to like sneak up and do it. I'm going to fuck you up to your
Yeah.
face. Whereas like
Yeah.
previous, like, yeah. And she is
Yeah.
making waves in Victoria. It seems like intergender wrestling is still more hotly more like questioned than it is in New South Wales. Seem to be leading the scene with intergender wrestling. In Victoria, it's
Yeah.
still very like, and maybe that's again because we don't have as many female wrestlers. She, I think, is paving the path for intergender wrestling in Victoria.
Yeah, she had a match last year that was so I did the Voices of Wrestling top 10 thing, right, where you vote the top 10 matches, and she had one that I struggled like between it and another match for my number 10, and it ended up losing out, so it's clearly my number 11 match from last year, which was with Dowie James at, I want to say it was at Adrenaline Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, I know the match you're talking about. I'm not sure what show it was at.
Yeah, but that's the thing too, is she's a wrestler. She's a wrestler's wrestler. Like, she can wrestle, which is something that's really big for me. Like, I like wrestlers who can wrestle. Like, if you can fight and kick ass and, knock heads off and stuff, that's awesome too. But like, she can like grapple.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she has a really strong grapple game, and yeah, she's just complete all round. Like, I don't know how she's not on my list. I feel really bad.
Yeah, and she had one even just a couple of weeks ago at Mayhem. She faced Fox, I think Funtime Phil, whatever his Mayhem character is.
Yeah,
I think he's Fox at Mayhem. They had an awesome match, or it was an awesome match. And she was in a tag team with Alan Payne I think it was in BCW. And yeah, awesome. So she can transfer quite seamlessly between women's wrestling and intergender wrestling.
Yeah, and she's had a good quick little run over in Europe as well, and from what I hear, it's possible that she may end up going back because she had good reactions over there, so that's awesome. But yeah, that's our list, people. That's the top 5 women we've seen live, or in Danda's case, the top 5 women's matches she's seen live, because Danda's does whatever Danda's wants to do.
You're not my supervisor.
This is a lot of fun.
But I am your editor, so I can just chop and change all of this.
Look, if you had just to summarize, Kellyanne would be number 1, Avery number 2, Evie number 3, everyone else honorable mentions.
There we go. Oh man, I just realized that I've seen Erica Reed live too. So honorable mention there as well.
It's hard to honorable mention every women's wrestler you've ever seen.
No, I'm not. No, because again, it's the aura. Like her thing with Sid too. They're just an amazing duo. But anyway, let's last words from Mr. Mysterious.
So yeah, no, this is fun. Like I had a lot more time to think about. This is a lot easier list to compile, of course, just with the amount of women's wrestlers that we have in Australia. So it's a lot more relaxing process than I say to last week. But if you want to follow me on the socials, you can follow me at Mr. Mysterious with a 1 and 7 I. How about yourself, Danders?
I'm basically just on Twitter at the moment, so just at Danderfield on Twitter. I post photos of dogs I've patted. That's pretty much it.
Right, you realize that Instagram is supposed to be for photos of dogs and people's abs, and Twitter is meant to be for like, I just took a poop. I don't know.
But no one sends me photos of their dicks on Twitter. That's not a request, by the way, anyone listening. So I'm just sticking with Twitter at the moment. Please don't add me on Facebook if we're not friends.
I am at Greg Unchained on Twitter, at the Greg Unchained on Instagram. We collectively are the B Plus Wrestling on Twitter because wrestling wouldn't fit. The B Plus Wrestling everywhere else. Like, share, subscribe if you want to support what we do and get episodes like this where we will thank you. Thank you, Jules. If you want to get episodes like this where you get to tell us what we to talk about, it doesn't have to be lists. It can be anything you want, any topic you want. And you pick the panelists and we will do a show for you. You can do that at Patreon. You can also be a part of our call-in shows, which I know Danders enjoys hosting with me there as well. And so, yeah, we're going to do more and more of these things as time goes on. So get around it at patreon.com/theb+. And as always, thank you so much for listening.
See you guys.
Hold 1. Arm drag.
You're not doing this. Get out. Let me tell you a personal story about Vince McMahon.
You just made the list.
Sorry, no speak English.
Dummy. Yeah.
Goodbye and good night.
Hold 2. Arm bar.
This is the worst town I've ever been in.
It's still real to me, damn it. Dummy. Yeah. Hold 3. The moss covered. 3-handle family good